I spent 22 years at Clemson University trying to be an aquaculture engineer, and then I returned to the University of Missouri 4 years ago to see if I could correct all the mistakes I made the other 25 years. So to me, green food production means systems providing sustainable food, and since I'm an aquaculture engineer, seafood in particular. And I agree with the definition of sustainable living, production to meeting the needs of the present without compromising the ability of the future. However, I'll argue the word need. Most of us in the United States don't live our life according to need. We live our life according to our wants and desires. I don't argue this point, so I'll just go ahead and see, can we meet our desires and do it in a sustainable way? So what's sustainable aquaculture? Aquatic animal production using renewable resources, particularly carbohydrate and protein input, meaning fish meal, reducing fossil fuel usage, and then waste generation being contained within the producing footprint itself, not exporting waste to another environment. What's the driving force in aquaculture? Well, here it is right here, very vivid. End of 80s, beginning of the 90s, seafood production capacity of the world's oceans reached a plateau, and there is no more seafood coming from the world's oceans than current production. So any expansion in seafood has to come from aquaculture. Aquaculture is now producing 50% of our seafood demand, and that's not going to be changed. Where do we get our seafood? If you go to the restaurant or the store and you buy shrimp, I'm going to use the example of shrimp. U.S. imports amount to 85% coming primarily from China, Thailand, Vietnamese shrimp, and Indonesia. Wild caught is only 16%. It's coming in from Asia, and it's coming in at a wholesale price of around $3 a pound frozen. What's the problem with shrimp farming? So why is that a big deal? Here's what a typical shrimp farm in Asia on the coast of Indonesia would look like. The big deal is that they're discharging massive amounts of wastewater. 10 times more wastewater comes from shrimp ponds into the Asian coastal zone than all other industrial processes combined. And while they're discharging all that waste, they're consuming nearly a quarter of global fish meal production is going in to feed these systems. They recognize the limitations here, and they're starting to build closed systems, but they'll never expand this unless it becomes economical. And it's a lot more economical to throw stuff away, and that's what they're going to keep doing so long as they can get away with it. What's the problem? Why is this happening? Animal agriculture converts a very small fraction of protein feed into your desired product. Here's feed, soy, corn, and fish meal. 10% of the protein is converted into protein into this product, the Pacific white shrimp. 90% is dissipated as a waste. Now that's true of all animal agriculture. That's just the way it is. So what's the solution? When I got here, I started building my little system out at Bradford the last 4 years. Zero discharge designed ecosystem, basically incorporating living systems from nature to solve the problem, to support marine shrimp production, which is the target, but then having brine shrimp and tilapia co-production utilizing feeds and fuels off of that 90% of what would be wasted nitrogen. How do you do it? In aquaculture, there's 3 ways. You can use sunshine and photosynthetic organisms to make that waste nitrogen into algae and then use it, or you can add carbohydrate to convert the waste nitrogen to bacteria, or you can use organisms that are capable of dissipating the waste nitrogen as a non-harmful nitrogen gas. So here's a photo illustration of the process. Here comes the feed. Of course, mostly we're getting waste more than anything. The sunshine elevates that nitrogen waste to this green water, intensely green algal biomass, and this algal biomass is now a feed for tilapia, brine shrimp. The tilapia and the brine shrimp are food and feed that can completely eliminate the need to import fish meal. The solid waste from these critters gets concentrated and can be degraded to produce methane as an energy, and then the recalcitrant solids from the degradation of that, which is less than 1% by mass, becomes a slow release biofertilizer. Or you can take the sun out of the equation and inject sugar. Sugar in feed makes a brown water system. See the difference? Intensely green, sunshine, intensely brown. Heterotrophic organisms do the same exact thing. tilapia and brine shrimp can grow in the brown water, get the exact same thing. The difference is, instead of the sunshine, we're using the input of external sugar. Or we can simply dissipate. Another brown water system, we dissipate the nitrogen and carbon, but we don't get a lot of productivity when we do that. Bottom line, instead of making waste that we throw away, we make things that have value. $6 a pound for shrimp, $1 for the fish meal, 10 cents a kilowatt hour for the energy, $2 a pound for tilapia, 20 cents a pound. Everything has to have a value rather than throwing it away. So what's the obstacle to doing this? Why aren't people doing this? Because it has to be profitable. If it's not profitable, the farmers are not going to do it. The Asians aren't doing it because it's not profitable. We can do 3,500 to 28,000 pounds of shrimp in 90 to 120 days. We can replace 25 to 100% of the fossil fuel. Cash flow could be $20,000 to $500,000 an acre year, but we can't compete with Asian shrimp. $3 a pound, heads on, frozen shrimp, no way. I've got to get a higher price. I got to do fresh market, and I've got to get $5, $6 a pound, or I can't compete, even with all the value assigned to the waste products. So, review. Fisheries peaked in the 90s. You're not getting any more seafood out of the oceans. That's a fact. Aquaculture is going to supply because there's absolutely no choice. It's just that simple. U.S. seafood consumption, 30% of it's marine shrimp, 85% of it's imported. Existing production is absolutely unsustainable. The people doing it in Asia know that. But they're going to keep doing it as long as it's profitable. Until the government stops them from throwing away the waste, or until fish meal prices rise, they're going to keep doing it. So we can design sustainable aquaculture systems. They can be zero discharge, and we can convert all that waste nitrogen into valuable products, and we can produce an enormous amount of shrimp. But widespread deployment will require profitability. How are we going to get profitability? Either direct sale to consumer or premium wholesale price for higher quality, sustainably produced seafood. My best guess is we can capture 10% of the market. But if we capture 10% of the market, that's $0.6 billion worth of product. I think that's enough to launch an industry.
Okay, I'm a permaculture designer and an experienced forager, and I have worked on a diversity of farms, including large organic vegetable CSAs. I've tried to experience a lot of different methods in order to learn how best I fit into my food system. So from the permaculture perspective, green, or what I would like to say environmentally sustainable food, because like Naomi pointed out, green has so many connotations, and I think the greenwashing is inherent in that term. Environmentally sustainable food mimics bioregionally specific natural systems without disturbing ecosystem balance as functionally as possible given cultural restrictions. And the reason I put those in separate categories is because I think that they can be mutually exclusive, and some of the examples I'll give may meet one or two of those more than another, and vice versa. And I noted that, so in Missouri, I'll focus mostly on our bioregion here. We are fortunate enough to have very abundant systems, inherently abundant systems. So we have oak savanna, tall grass prairie that Bob Kramer mentioned, deciduous forests, and glades. And I loved that Naomi mentioned she's not going to tell you what green means, and I feel the same way. I think that if you want to know what green means, then you can go out to the wildest systems that we still have in place here, and those are your best teacher. That is the case for permaculture systems. So I'm not going to go through each one of these, we don't have time, but these are the 12 principles of permaculture. Within permaculture, and all of the examples I'll give are sort of under that umbrella, but perennial polyculture is one that I think stands out, and do-nothing agriculture as representative of permaculture. Perennial polyculture, of course, as Bob Kramer mentioned, these are the deep-rooted systems that aren't turned over year after year. In a biodiverse system, polyculture, more than one kind of plant and species. Do-nothing agriculture, we're talking about putting the least amount of inputs into the system and having maximizing outputs. And this, wild system is a great example of that. And by observing and interacting with those wild systems, we can better understand how we can let nature do what it knows how to do we don't have to mulch in a forest system. This all happens on its own and is abundant on its own. And I think that the kind of agriculture that we've arrived at today is in large part due to our desire for control. However, I would like to present that we can have quite a bit of control in an agroforestry system, in a permaculture system, using these natural systems to do all of the work for us. And the last principle there, I don't know if you noticed, was to respond to change. And the problem is the solution is another way of putting that. So some examples of the way people it's becoming a little bit more mainstream, of the problem is the solution applying that is integrated pest management, IPM. So rather than understanding these pests, insects that bother me too in the garden, as a problem, understanding that they're just part of an ecosystem that we need to adapt to. So once we understand what controls in nature are placed upon those insects, then we can implement that and use these ecological methods to make a system that benefits us, that has a yield. That's another principle of permaculture. There must be a yield without disturbing the ecosystem balance. Weeds are free food, no inputs. If you stop mowing your yard, you can start harvesting. This is, and this is something that anyone can do. It's really, if you are able to have the understanding of what plants are edible, and there really aren't very many plants in Missouri that will make you very sick. So knowing what plants will make you sick, first and foremost, will help you in a major way in that respect. So the image here of the forest garden is a great example of permaculture applied. I don't know if you can see the different layers here. So we're using all of the levels of what would otherwise be a sort of mock climax forest. So the canopy layer of large fruit and nut trees, low tree layer of dwarf fruit trees, shrub layer of currants and berries, herbaceous comfrey, beets, herbs, the rhizosphere, root vegetables, and I would add mushrooms, fungus, soil surface, ground cover, strawberries, vertical layer, climbers, and vines. This is very different from row cropping. And also, I might have sort of a reading list for you by the end of this. The One Straw Revolution is Masanobu Fukuoka of Do Nothing Agriculture from the first slide that I would recommend. And Restoration Agriculture is at the public library. Mark Shepard has a farm, New Forest Farm in Wisconsin, and he is practicing perennial polyculture and agroforestry in a way that I'll talk a little bit more about later. Oh my God, 2 minutes. Example 2, responsible, respectful hunting and gathering. Like I said, it's out there, it's available. The major necessities of this: time, access, and understanding. So if you quit your gym membership, turn off the TV, you might have time to access those pedestrian-friendly nature areas that are around Columbia. And there are lots of books at the public library to help you understand what plants are edible. You can come out into the woods with me. There's also the Missouri Mycological Society if you are interested in learning more about edible mushrooms. And they have a, I think, 4 or 5 session workshop series on Saturdays, and it costs maybe $15, so this is pretty doable. The third example, agroforestry, and the 5 arms of agroforestry there. I've bolded the first 3 because I think those are the most applicable within a food system. So forest farming, alley cropping, and silvopasture. Forest farming, the shiitake logs are up there as an example of just using niche environments within a forest system to produce food. Alley cropping, the 2 photos on the right and the one on the top is from New Forest Farm. It is in the fall, but you can see he's done what's called keyline design. So understanding contour and how to make the most of water and nutrient resources in the soil, saving soil resources in order to really get the most out of your production. And he's also practicing forest farming within that, polyculture, perennials. Silvopasture is integrating animal agriculture, grazing within tree farming. So you could have nut trees, be harvesting that, and be fertilizing your nut trees with your animal agriculture below. So once again, we're mimicking natural systems without disturbing ecosystem balance. And the fourth example, and I put a question mark here because I'm not so sure mindful organic agriculture is truly sustainable environmentally. You can see from this photo, looks quite a bit different from the pictures of forest farming and alley cropping that we just looked at. I do think there are great benefits of organic agriculture. There are not potentially harmful herbicides and pesticides in general put on them. It's relatively diverse. There are different crops in even one single row there. Often community building, resilience. It's easy to calculate yield and profit as a result. The cons, it doesn't mimic natural systems. I think that if there is ever exposed soil, that doesn't work. That doesn't happen in a natural system. And that's our best teacher. That's what we know works. We know is abundant and sustainable. It keeps feeding all of the wildlife out there, minus what we've destroyed. And potentially create separatism based on the perceived elitism of organic food, which I would argue is becoming less of an issue. So ultimately, natural systems in Missouri are inherently abundant. As I've said, if you have a yard, plant a fruit tree, a nut tree, stop mowing, start harvesting, mulch or mow discriminately. If you have a farm and need to make a profit, start by investing in keyline design and plant productive trees yesterday. And always practice stewardship and gratitude. I think that is underlying all of this. The photo there behind it is a chestnut, something that Mike Gold back there, you can talk to him about chestnuts. Okay.